course, many of those died, and many still suffer today from Guillain-Barré syndrome. Rumsfeld's track record is really quite remarkable. He has been a major player. He was actually CEO of Searle in 1983 when Reagan was running for president, and he convinced Reagan that Reagan should actually change the head of the Food and Drug Administration so that aspartame could be introduced into the food chain. Aspartame is proven to cause holes in the brains of young rats, and of course aspartame has effectively been linked very strongly with ADHD in young people. In fact, in some states in the US, some drinks that are loaded with aspartame are banned if they are marketed towards under 12s. He made 15 million out of the sale of Searle to Monsanto, and he was a major player, which I'll show in a second, in Tamiflu. Now Tamiflu is a psychoactive, and in the US it is a requirement that all boxes of Tamiflu have a warning which states that patients taking Tamiflu should be carefully monitored for unusual behaviour, because it was linked to paediatric deaths and self-harming in both Japan and the US. Why is that warning not on the boxes of Tamiflu that have been distributed ad infinitum, ad nauseum throughout Europe? This is when we see the initial outbreak of swine flu earlier this year, Wednesday the 22nd of April, when the media caught wind of an outbreak a few miles away from a Baxter facility in Mexico. The stock price jumped, but the media didn't run with it on Friday, so the stock price fell a bit, but over the weekend it went viral. And on that weekend, all the media all around the world were running articles about this swine flu pandemic, and the stock price of Gilead Sciences rocketed. So Rumsfeld, he was chairman and chief executive officer of Gilead Sciences between 1995 and 2001, when Tamiflu was developed by Gilead Sciences. Of course, he was a member of the PNAC group, the Project for New American Century. He's one of the signatories to that report, Rebuilding America's Defenses, published exactly 1 year before 9/11, which stated that the only way to get the American people to support the global hegemony that the US scriptwriters wanted to implement was to create a catastrophic and cataclysmic event like the New Pearl Harbor. Because 1 year later they got that. The day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld announced to the media that the Pentagon could not account for $2.3 trillion. Now, I know that sum has been sort of pulled into insignificance with the recent bank bailout, but back in 2001, this was a big number. Now, how could this guy ever have known that the day after he made this announcement to the press, something so enormous would occur that this would be completely lost? Remarkable, isn't it? I mean, that's truly incredible. His role continues, obviously, in the 9/11 Commission. They never really got to the bottom of where Rumsfeld was on 9/11. He was clearly the architect of the plans to, or one of the two architects of the plans to invade Afghanistan. 2 reasons. 1, to make sure that Occidental got their pipeline across Afghanistan, and 2, to re-establish the opium trade, which the Taliban had effectively destroyed. He was the architect of the whole construct of weapons of mass destruction. His number 2 at the time, Paul Wolfowitz, in an interview with Esquire magazine, when asked why they presented weapons of mass destruction as the reason to invade Iraq, Paul Wolfowitz said it was the only thing we could come up with that the people would buy. Okay, he couldn't actually get into the World Bank himself, so he got his number 2 into the role of head of the World Bank, Paul Wolfowitz. Unfortunately, Paul Wolfowitz couldn't leave the staff alone, so he got run off, and he was replaced by Robert Zoellick, another signatory to the 2000 PNAC document, Rebuilding America's Defenses. Of course, Donald Rumsfeld made out like a bandit over the, because of the sale of Tamiflu around the globe, over the bird flu scares of 2004 and 2007, and we come full circle then, because he's making out like a bandit again. because of the swine flu scam of 2009. So this guy's a good soldier. This guy does exactly what it is he's told. There's a better picture of him. Okay, anybody who says that the swine flu scam wasn't foreseen, I'm going to skip through this because there's some other things I want to talk about, but I cover this much more on this DVD, the truth injection. I also have a copy of a PowerPoint presentation that was presented by Liz McIntosh, who runs the health desk of the Civil Contingency Secretariat in the British government. And she made this presentation to every single health authority around the UK in 2006. And it talks about the coming pandemic and everything that needs to be done in terms of preparing for that pandemic. I mean, how did they know? Let me skip through it. Is there a list here? Obama, on October the 23rd, declared a national emergency with swine flu. I mean, nobody knows why, because it's really not a major problem. But the Bush administration introduced legislation which effectively protects the vaccine manufacturers in the event of an emergency being declared. So as of October the 23rd, the vaccine manufacturers are protected and cannot be sued in the event of people suffering from negative effects up to and including death from the vaccine. Also, a number of states like New York, Oklahoma and Texas had also introduced legislation which stated that in the event of a national emergency being declared, it would be illegal for any citizen to refuse the instruction of a healthcare professional. Now, in New York State, the New York governor, on October 23rd, immediately declared a state of emergency and demanded all healthcare workers subject themselves to swine flu vaccine. Fortunately, they rebelled, and 60% of them said, no, we're not going to have it. So the state governor basically said, okay, you're all going to be out of jobs. Unfortunately, they stood their ground and said, well, okay, you won't have a healthcare service. So the next day, he said, you know what, we're not going to implement that legislation right now. So it just goes to show, if people are making the effort to educate themselves, they can actually really make a difference. In the UK, the marketing continues apace. They say everyone's going to get the swine flu vaccine, that babies are going to get a swine flu jab. Now this was horrendous because they actually stated in this article that 1,000 babies had been tested, had the vaccine tested on them in the Southampton area. So I asked the question, how the hell do you get 1,000 sets of parents to volunteer their kids, to subject their kids to this vaccine? And do you know what I discovered? No, they don't get parents to do it. They go to the social services and they target all the kids in care. Now this is a fundamental breach of the human rights of those children. But this is the way in which the state is starting to totally override all liberties. The Guillain-Barré syndrome, this is something that is linked very specifically to the vaccine. Yet I picked up a New Scientist, a copy of New Scientist a few weeks ago. And what attracted me to this particular publication was this. It said, swine flu myths, what you really need to know. Now this is a very well-respected scientific publication in the UK. So I thought, okay, I need to read this, swine flu myths, what you really need to know. But then, I actually saw this on the bottom here, the hunt, Predator X, the hunt for the ultimate killer. So I decided to help them out a bit. But Predator X himself, David Rockefeller. Don't underestimate this guy. He openly admits what his agenda is, and he considers that the masses to be far too stupid and ignorant to be able to react against his agenda to establish global governance. So, the swine flu myths. This was the headline. What few people know is that flu itself is more likely to cause Guillain-Barré syndrome than any vaccine. Now, I've been researching this subject, basically since April 22nd. And I did not come across a single report where Guillain-Barré syndrome was linked to the flu. In every case, it was linked to the vaccine. Now, in this article, this statement was made with no supporting evidence, no references. So it was just a bland statement incorporated into the article that the scientific reader is supposed to take at face value. Now, this is just completely and utterly outrageous. I have to take questions later, otherwise we'll never get through. Okay? And of course, we've got the adjuvants. Now, the adjuvants are banned by the Food and Drug Administration in the US. They're completely banned. But here, we have two sets of vaccine, one with the adjuvants and one without. The one without is being offered to the German military and the German government. The one with squalene is the adjuvant that's being used, and squalene has been linked to Gulf War syndrome. Because it was an ingredient in the cocktail of vaccines given to the British and US military during the First Gulf War. Now, this was remarkable as well. Obviously, there have been very significant campaigns to try and encourage people to educate themselves about the potential effects of subjecting themselves to the swine flu vaccine. And this is from the Times about 10 days ago. Sir Liam Donaldson, who's the government's chief medical officer, he warns of extremists attacking the flu vaccination campaign. Extremists. I mean, hey, how much longer does it take to go from extremist to terrorist? About 10 minutes, probably. Yeah. I'm going to stay very much, obviously, with the nuts and bolts today, but I just want to draw your attention to an observation that Rudolf Steiner made back in 1917 in a series of lectures called The Fall of the Spirits of Darkness. And in that lecture, he said the spirits of darkness are going to inspire their human hosts, in whom they will be dwelling, to find a vaccine that will drive all inclination towards spirituality out of people's souls when they are still very young. Children will be vaccinated with a substance which it will certainly be possible to produce, and this will make them immune, so that they do not develop foolish inclinations connected with spiritual life. Foolish here, of course, in the eyes of the materialists. Zbigniew Brzezinski, writing in Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era, made the observation that the challenge for future government will be to keep humanity locked into consumerist materialism, preventing them from getting in touch with their true selves. Codex Alimentarius, we said the goals, as far as I'm concerned, are very clear. It's not spelled out in words of one syllable. These guys are way too smart for that. This is an agenda that's achieved through the process of surreptitious gradualism. The unlabeled GM and processed food. This is how they effectively plan to eradicate organic farming. Because if there's no requirement for labelling, how will people know what's in the food? All vitamins and mineral supplements will be very low, ineffectual doses. And herbs and other natural drugs, natural remedies, to be classified as drugs, only available on prescription. Next up is going to be Scott Chips. Okay, this is the guy. I mean, I got in touch with Scott, he got in touch with me, I can't remember now, but a little over about 18 months ago. And in the course of the last 15 months, we've now done, I think, about a dozen joint presentations around the UK and now in Belgium. Scott is the guy, he's the only guy representing the consumer who has the right to sit on the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So, Scott is going to discuss the specific details of what is occurring. I'm giving you the overview and the prognosis here. Scott will show you, what is occurring right now and the challenges that he and the National Health Federation face. It's a very complex structure. It's meant to be complex so that nobody actually can understand what's occurring. There are two key committees which Scott focuses on, in my